Are you in the market for a single-cylinder dual sport bike and you're considering the Honda XR650L? Now in this video I want to chat about the 11 things that I wish I knew before I bought my Honda XR650L. Hi, I'm Francois from adventurebikegroup.com. Now, I've owned many dual sport bikes, single cylinder 650 dual sport bikes over the years. I've had a couple of Kawasaki KLR650s, a Suzuki DR750 Big, BMW F650 and an XT500. But ever since I read about the Desert Riders project of Chris Scott from the Adventure Motorcycling Handbook, I've been interested in the Honda XR650L. Many people say you can't compare it to the other dual sports because it is more of a dirt bike, but if you look at what people have done with these bikes, thousands of miles of touring around the world with lots of luggage, then it is a contender as a dual sport adventure bike. But when you have a look at bikes, when you test ride them, it's often you don't have enough time to spend with the bike to find out all the little things. Now this video is not to diss the XR650L. I mean, it is my bike and I love the bike. There's a lot of things going for it, but there are a couple of things that I wish I knew before. Now none of them are deal breakers. It's just some things that might be important to you. So if you are looking for a 650 and especially interested in the XR650L, these are the 11 things that I wish I knew before I bought the bike. Now, if you own the XR650L and there's anything you want to add to make this helpful to prospective buyers, please comment below. Or if there's anything you disagree with or feel that it's not important, you're welcome to comment below. And if you have any questions on the XR650L before you buy, also please ask and I'll reply in the comments below. Now, the first thing that I didn't know about the XR650L when I bought it, and I only found this out later, is that it doesn't have a cush-drive in the rear hub. Now that's that rubber thing that connects the drivetrain or the sprocket to the wheel, and this absorbs some of the impact or the shock when you change gears or when you pull away. Now a lot of dirt bikes, I'm actually not sure, I think most dirt bikes don't have cush drives because you ride in the dirt and the wheels can spin to take up the slack. Whereas road bikes, or most 650s in fact, have that cush drive in the rear hub because you ride on tar a lot. And the problem with not having a cush drive is gear shifts are not as smooth, and the main thing is there's more strain on the drivetrain. So when you accelerate hard on the tar, there's always that impact from the sprocket on the rear hub, and it will wear the parts quicker, the drivetrain will wear quicker. And the problem is the countershaft sprocket is one of the issues which we'll come to next. So a cush drive is something that I didn't know the XR650L doesn't have. Now you can get a replacement or aftermarket parts. I'll link in the description below. But it's quite expensive to get a rear hub with a cush drive for this bike. I know some people have fitted the Transalp, the 650 Transalp rear wheel with some modifications. I'm not sure what that entails. But anyways, I ride mostly in the dirt, so it's not a big issue. And when I do ride in the tar, you must just be smooth with your gear changes to lessen the impact on the rear hub. So that brings me to the second thing, and this I did know about, and you'll find this all over the internet, is that on the XR650L, the weak point is the countershaft and the countershaft sprocket. The sprocket is way too thin, or it's very thin, 8.5 millimeters, and it can move around on the countershaft, and that wears a groove into the countershaft if you don't look after it. And there's a lot of aftermarket replacements. I'll make videos to test some of these sprockets in future, but you can see the links in the description below, and you'll find this all over the internet. So I knew about this before because I did my research, and there's various reasons for this. One is that there's no cush drive. Also, people run the chain too tight, and then the sprocket is just too thin. And one thing that I did before I bought this bike is to have a look at that. So I took off the cover to see what the wear looks like on the countershaft. Because some bikes, even after a couple of thousand miles, already have way too much damage, and I've seen sprockets welded to the countershaft because of that wear. So make sure that when you buy an XR650L, the first thing you want to look is take off that countershaft, of the sprocket cover, and look at the wear of the countershaft. Now the third thing that I didn't really consider even when I bought this bike is the fact that because of the long trail suspension, there's a lot of slack in the chain, the chain, and you need slack in the chain because of the movement. So when you compress the shocks, the wheel moves to the furthest point away from the countershaft, and so you need a lot of slack in order to compensate for that stretch in the chain, and that will result in a lot of slapping of the chain against the swing arm. And when you ride slowly, and that's where I've noticed this the most, when you ride slowly, say 20 miles per hour in second gear, there's a lot of jerking back and forth. And if you want to maintain a constant speed, and I have to do that in this estate, we have to drive or ride at a slow speed for quite a while to get outside, and it's really noticeable because of that, the long chain, the slack in the chain. Once you get moving, you don't notice it at all. But with my old Kawasaki, the Kawasaki didn't even have the chain guide because the chain is just not as slack, or there's not a lot of such a big difference between a straight chain and the wheel hanging down. So that is something to consider if you're going to ride in traffic, slowly in traffic. But once you get moving, accelerating, then it's fine. It's just when you try to maintain a constant speed in a low gear. The fourth thing that I also didn't know about the XR650L compared to other 650s in this class is the fact that the frame is a one piece. The rear subframe is not detachable. Now the problem with that is if you do break the rear subframe, you can't replace it. You have to weld it or replace the whole frame. Now it might not be such a big issue, but I have seen frames break on KLRs right in the middle, a DR750 on the rear subframe, and even BMW 1150 Adventures break frames if you overload it. And the XR, it is not the strongest. It's not made to carry 50 kilograms of weight or luggage with a passenger. So if you do overload it, there is a big chance you're going to break it. And a lot of people brace the rear or the subframe or the frame in order to take extra weight. But if you do break it, you sit with the problem of having to replace the whole frame or having to weld it. You can't just replace the rear subframe. Then number 5 is the fact that this is air cooled. Now it's obvious, and if you know a little bit about the XR650L, you would know this. But the reason I mention this is most of the other 650s in this class, the KLR, the DR, the BMWs, are liquid cooled. Even the new XTs, the old XTs were air cooled. And it's not a big issue. It's simpler. There's less to maintain, but you do have the risk of overheating if you don't look after it and if you don't set the valve clearances and tune the carburetor properly so you run it lean. So it is air cooled. It might be seen as an advantage, but it's something to consider. And then another thing is, and this is where you can get confused, is that the XR650R, the big red pig, has the liquid cooled engine, so you won't see these fins and you'll see the radiator, whereas the 650L, which is basically the old 600R, just a little bit bigger, this is air cooled. So just some people fit oil coolers or weld on bigger fins. I think there's aftermarket fins, XRs only, I think. But anyways, if you keep it well maintained, a good thing is to get a gauge to see what the temperature is like, and when you tune the carburetor you can also see what it does to the heat. I live in a very hot area. I haven't had it overheat yet, but anyways, it's something to consider. So the sixth thing about the XR650L that you should know before buying it, and you'll find this online, is the jetting. The bike is jetted too lean from factory, and this is to reduce the emissions because it is an old primitive air-cooled engine. So what they do is they jet it with a smaller pilot and main jet. There's a tab on the fuel mixture screw that prevents you from richening the mixture, and there's a restriction in the snorkel, so there's restricted airflow, and you hear the bike backfire or pop when you decelerate. Now, in order to fix this, it's very easy. You can just Google Dave's mod, and this is where you rejet it with bigger jets, pilot and main jet, to remove the snorkel, drill the slide for more throttle response, shim the needle on the carburetor. So there's a whole lot of things that you can do easily at home to richen the mixture and to de-restrict the airflow. Now, a lot of people do this to get more power. I'm not sure how much more power you'll get. I can feel a difference after I did it, but the main reason is you don't want to run this air-cooled engine too lean, because it'll overheat more easily. So a richer mixture is always better than a too lean mixture. And number 7, and this is also something that you can easily find if you are looking for it, but it's got a very small tank, so your range is very limited with the stock tank. This tank is about 10.8 liters, I think, 2.8 gallons, and you can't even use all of it because it picks up in one of these lobes. The pickup is in one of these lobes, so there's always some fuel on the right hand side that you can't use. You can drop the bike over in an emergency to get you a couple of extra miles. It's annoying. So the usable capacity on the tank is about 2.2 gallons, and this last time I rode, I did have some fun in the mud and dirt, but I went to reserve at exactly 55 miles. I mean, 50, that's 90 kilometers, and the bike died, went on reserve. I think currently mine is a bit too rich, so it is quite heavy on fuel. I need to rejet it again a bit leaner, but the fuel consumption is also not great. I think I get between 12 to 15 kilometers per liter. I'll put the miles per gallon on the screen here. And that's terrible. So I know mine is not jetted properly, but I remember with my KLR, I could easily get 20, 22 kilometers per liter. Same with the BMW. So the range on this is appalling. I can't even reach the nearest town, which is 75 miles from here. I have to take extra, I have to put it on reserve or take extra fuel if I ride it like this. So that is something to consider. You can get the big tanks that will extend the range quite a bit. But it does change the off-road capability somewhat, and yeah, so anyways, that's something I'll consider if I keep this bike. Then number 8, if you want to tour this with this bike, and it's definitely possible, people has done thousands and thousands of miles across the Americas, North Africa in the desert, and with lots of luggage. So if you want to tour this bike, something to consider is the fact that there is no rack at the back. There's not even a small little rack. There's this little pouch for tools or this manual, but there's no place. You have to strap the luggage to the seat, or you have to brace the subframe and get racks, or you can hang bags from it. But other bikes in the class, like the KLR, has a big rack on the back already. The BMWs have a small rack where you can fit a top box. This doesn't. So you're gonna have to modify it in order to carry lots of luggage. Small weekend trip, it's fine. Strap your bag to the tank on your back. A tank bag will fit easily. But that's something to take into account when you buy your bike for touring. And number 9, I don't know whether this is just my bike, but what I noticed, I heard a bit of a sound when I moved the handlebars, and I saw the whole wiring loom is squished between the front fender and the triple clamp. So when you move the handlebars, there's a scraping noise, or there's definitely some chafing there. And I'm not sure whether this is on all bikes. I think I'll move the fender down a bit with washers just to lessen that chafing, because I'm worried that it'll chafe through and could cause a short or something not working then. So this is just something to look out for. I've never heard anyone else mention this before, so it might just be my bike. But anyways, that's something that it's just annoying, because you don't want something like that to leave you stranded in the middle of nowhere. Then number 10, this is also something you'll find online when you search for problems with these bikes, is the factory CDI, the original CDI that sits with the battery in the battery box, is something that is prone to give problems, intermittent starting or failing, stalling problems, or the bike just won't start. And this is apparently due to the solders coming loose inside. And I've also heard that some say if the battery connections are not on properly, so if there's not a proper connection between the positive and the negative terminals on the battery, that could cause the CDI to fail prematurely. Now, there are aftermarket CDIs available. Some say you have to ride with a spare. I don't have one currently, but if I do go on a long trip, I will take one with. I'll get one. Some also say, I think it's the NX Dominator, the 650 Dominator has the same CDI, means the same engine. So yeah, that's something that you might want to take with, but it is quite an expensive thing to just carry with you as a part. Some people have also removed the CDI or opened it up. You have to take a hacksaw and cut off the rear and then fix the solders or properly solder them, and apparently then they last forever. So that's just something to consider, and if your bike has intermittent starting problems, that's the first place you might want to have a look. And then the last thing that you need to know about the XR650L is that it is super tall. Now this is something that you will notice when you take it for a ride, but it is unexpected. I didn't expect it to be that much taller than the other bikes that I've owned before. This is 37 inches. It's the tallest in the class. The only other bike that comes close is the KTM 640 Adventure. And this is due to the long travel suspension and the amount of ground clearance that you have. And it's for an awesome off-road bike, but if you are vertically challenged, then it might be a bit of an issue. Obviously, if you heavily load it, the suspension is not that stiff, so it will lower it somewhat. But the bike is heavy, or not heavy, it's very tall, and I didn't expect it to be that tall. Anyways, thank you for joining. If there's anything else that you want to know about this bike, I'd be happy to answer you in the comments, so please leave a comment below. And thank you for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up. It will show up to more users on YouTube then to find this video. I'd really appreciate that, and please consider subscribing for more videos on the XR650L and any other bike related stuff. Thank you. See you next week.